This is Travel in 10, a series of 10-minute travel shows from around the world that you can download to your iPod and take with you as you travel.
And now, your host, David Brody.
Well, welcome to this month's edition of the Travel in 10 podcast. If you've checked out our website recently at www.travelin10.com, you'll see that the site's been relaunched with a new look, a new logo, and a couple of new sections as well. There's a travel deal section where you can book your travel around the world and support the podcast. There's also a travel resources section, which includes all of our past podcasts from around the world. On this month's show, I'm going to be featuring part 2 of my interview with world-renowned guidebook author and publisher Arthur Frommer. He's just put out a new book called Ask Arthur Frommer, his tips on how to travel better, cheaper, and smarter around the world. He's got some great information and great advice on where to go and how best to do it. Also, as part of the relaunch of our new website, we're going to be doing a guidebook giveaway again this month. This one is going to be a book called 500 Places Where You Can Make a Difference, also published by Frommers. Really interesting guidebook that talks about everything from how you can arrange a volunteer vacation where you'll go care for baby elephants in Sri Lanka, how you could go restore a medieval village in Tuscany, or work with scientists at the Smithsonian in Washington. All kinds of interesting ideas on different types of volunteer vacations that you might be interested in and how to arrange them. You can find all the information you need on entering the contest at our new website at www.travelin10.com. But for this month, hope you enjoy part 2 of my interview with Arthur Frommer. I'm sure throughout your career you've got to enjoy some amazing travel destinations. What are some of your favorites that you keep coming back to?
Well, my favorite destination in all the world is the city of Paris. I could go there 20 times a year. I love it so much, and I enjoy my stays there. But I enjoy so many things in the world today. I was so fascinated by a recent visit to your city, to the city of Vancouver, and was absolutely overwhelmed by the multi-ethnic nature of Vancouver, of the large percentage of your population who are now foreign-born and who have brought such vitality to that city. And I was just so impressed by the building that is going on and the beauty of the city and the wonderful charms and pleasures and enjoyment that it provides. And Roberta and I, my wife, had a wonderful trip to Vancouver. But I go all over the world. I love visiting everything ranging from the hill tribes of Southeast Asia to the boulevards of Buenos Aires. I've traveled all my life. I'm trying to continue to travel, although I've slowed down a little bit. I don't travel to the same extent as I used to.
Well, I understand, and I hope I'm not spilling any secrets here, that you've turned 80 not so long ago.
That's right. I had my birthday, my 80th birthday. But I have a secret, which is that when you get to 80, it's simply a figure. It has no meaning whatsoever. I don't feel any less mentally competent than I used to have. I still have the same attitudes toward life, toward food, toward work.
Well, it's clear. I mean, you have your own travel blog. You keep so current on travel trends, not things that I think a lot of people perhaps your age are doing. And do you think travel has been a big factor in that and a big part of keeping you so young?
Well, no. Travel is a fatiguing activity. Believe me, I don't have the same energy that I used to have when I traveled. When I was writing my books, I would get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and I would hit the streets. I would go, spend the entire day combing through a city looking for wonderful new discoveries to write up in my book. And I recall that I would just get so overjoyed when I discovered something wonderful, and I would run back to my hotel and write it up right away. But people are today living much longer and much more active lives at a time when in previous generations you called it quits. But I celebrated my 80th birthday just the other week in the company of my family, and we all went traveling around the Mediterranean, having a very active time of it. And I hope I'll be able to pursue that for a long time to come.
Well, it doesn't sound like a bad way to spend your birthday.
Thank you.
Is there anywhere that you haven't been to yet that you'd still like to go?
I've never been to Chile. I don't know why I never went to Chile in South America. I guess it was because of its government at that time that it had Pinochet, a horrible dictator who ran it. I stayed away from it. I never got to Tibet before Tibet got taken over by the Chinese, and I now would not go back there. I've been to most places in the world that I want to see, but I go back to a great many of them as well. And I am a fierce opponent a fierce advocate of traveling unpretentiously, of carrying a very light suitcase with just one or two changes of clothing in it, of thus maintaining your freedom to make choices, to move about easily without becoming a captive of porters and taxi cabs. And I write a great deal about this attitude toward travel in my book. I have never found a single deluxe hotel anywhere in the world that gives me as much pleasure as the average family-run guest house does. And my wife and I continue to stay in guest houses all over the world, where we take breakfast in the very kitchen of the family that both lives in and operates the guest house or the pension, the B&B, where we stay. So I'm afraid that I've gotten locked into a viewpoint that low-cost travel is the best way to travel, and I think you'll find that expressed in every page of Ask Arthur Fromer, and I've devoted myself to discussing the scores and scores of tactics and procedures and facilities that you can make use of in order to be able to travel cheaply.
On the last part of our interview together, we talked a bit about some of your favorite places to travel around the world. Are there any places that you think are really underrated right now?
Well, South America is definitely underrated. One country that has been removed from travel choices is Mexico, of course, because of the outbreak of swine flu several months ago, followed by the reports of drug-related violence. Mexico has virtually lost its tourism. Many of the hotels there have occupancy rates of 15%. And yet I think it's generally recognized that you face no greater danger of swine flu in Mexico than in any other country on earth, including our own.
That's right.
And the drug-related violence is generally limited to the border cities near Texas and Arizona and don't affect the tourist in the slightest. And I think there are fantastic values that you can now get, wonderful packages that all the airlines flying to Mexico are offering. That, if you want, can enable you to stay at 5-star deluxe hotels for $50 a night. So I definitely regard Mexico as an underrated destination.
Now, you also have a great section in your book on adventure travel. Wondering what are some of your favorite adventure travel experiences?
Well, the adventure travel to which I refer is not the adventure travel that involves risking your life, going hang gliding or rock climbing or that type of adventure. To me, an adventure consists of going to a remote, lightly visited destination, a place that is not yet the subject of mass volume tourism. And you have in Canada this magnificent company that runs hundreds of adventure tours defined in that manner at a very low cost, and yet they operate them very, very well. The Gap Adventures, which is headquartered in Toronto, but the Gap is only one of 6 or 7 companies that run these adventure tours that are limited to groups of less than 12 people that make use only of locally owned accommodations, that make use of public transportation to get from place to place. They do not stuff you into a 45-seat motor coach. When you want to go to a museum with your fellow tourists, you go to the curb and you get on a bus. You go rather the public bus. You take the local transportation, which gives you still another look at the personality of the city, which enables you to understand the lifestyles of the people that you're visiting. So this is the kind of adventure travel that I recommend. And it's a travel to lightly visited destinations, to Ecuador, to Romania, to places that don't get the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tourists that have made tourism difficult to some destinations.
Do you ever worry about, when you include a destination or an undiscovered, whether it's a restaurant, a hotel, or a village somewhere, when it appears in a guidebook or in one of your magazines, that it loses some of that magic?
You're absolutely right. That's one of the problems of writing a guidebook. And early on in writing Europe on $5 a day, I learned that I should never say that a particular hotel or a particular restaurant is the single best restaurant in a particular city, because by doing so, I would destroy that restaurant or that hotel. It would
Sure.
be so overwhelmed with tourism that it would become a different type of entity. So I simply learned that the answer was to recommend a great many of them and to scatter them and to spread out the patronage that each one would receive.
And finally, with this book written, you've put so much of yourself into it, so much great advice and so many tips. What's next for you, and what's next for Frommers?
Well, I am thinking of doing an autobiography of my life called The Life and Travel. I'm thinking of doing certainly a revised, a second edition next year of Ask Arthur Frommer. I want to expand Ask Arthur Frommer into a much more major book than it even now is. It's now 500 pages. Maybe we'll double it in size and make it truly encyclopedic. And, of course, at the Arthur Frommer organization, we are also stressing and expanding our use of the Internet. We now convey travel information in numerous different fashions, not only in blogs, but to mobile devices, to every conceivable way of transmitting travel information. And this is very exciting. It's a new stage in the evolution of travel information.
Well, I look forward to reading the autobiography and reading the next edition.
Well, thank you very much for calling me, and I very much enjoyed being with you.
Thanks for listening. Download more of our travel shows from around the world at www.travelin10.com.
This has been a presentation of Travel in 10.